Welcome along to Man in the Mirror. It's Hayden here. And as I said in the introduction, today my guest is Teddy Haugen, known as Teddy the Perfumer. And he's joining me from the West Coast of America. Good morning, Teddy. How are you?
I am doing good. Thanks for having me on.
It's been my absolute pleasure. And yeah, as I mentioned in my introduction, it's really just I've been loving your content. I mainly found your content on Instagram. Really been drawn to how you have a kind of wider lens on the industry. You're obviously a perfumer, which we'll get into, but I really like how you kind of broaden it out and talk about other brands. You talk about the process, and selfishly, I was just really keen to find out a bit more about you and your story, and of course your fragrances, which I think currently there's three in the collection. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, we got Banane Au Chocolat, Passing Stranger, and Summer in Love. Those are the three of them.
Amazing. Well, look, as I said, I sort of found your content on Instagram, but I'd love to know. I mean, what happened before perfumery? Have you been doing other things? How did it come about this move into the world of perfume?
Yeah, I think the the joke I overuse is that it was a slow descent into madness, and I didn't have aspirations, or I never really even thought about being a perfumer when I was younger. But I did realize I had a really sensitive smell.
Yeah,
I was called a bloodhound as I was growing up, and just small things like, if people were leaving their clothing in the washer too long, I could immediately smell when people were kind of musty and moldy
yeah,
and nobody else was
yeah.
noticing, stuff like that. But
Were
I
you a
went down
big
a whole different
collector of
path.
fragrance as well? Did you have lots of fragrances when you were younger?
Yeah, I started collecting. My first serious fragrance was like halfway through high school, and it was Fahrenheit by Dior. That was
Great.
a fun
Yeah.
one. But actually, technically, right before that, I think my mom got me like the Bod Man Trio. If you
What's
look that
that?
up,
The
they were
Bod Man.
popular kind of like pre-Axe in America.
Okay,
One of them
right.
smelled pretty good, very shower fresh.
Yeah.
And I started collecting in high school. Like I got Baldessarini was one of them. Dior Fahrenheit was my first one. A couple more, and then just over time was buying more and more. And then after college, started slowly getting into like niche and just I've got an obsessive personality. And so while I was doing this whole other career track, I just don't do things super light. And as I learned more and more, it got more into how they're made in the industry. And then eventually I was buying textbooks. And before I knew it, I had a lab in my house basically. But I'm my main career. I'm been in Silicon Valley startups for this whole time, and I'm in
Really?
fintech
Right.
and that whole thing. So my joke is that some executives took up golf, and then I ended up taking up perfumery, and that golf would have been cheaper.
Yeah, yeah. And has that are you still doing aspects of that, Teddy, or is it solely perfumery now and the brand?
No, perfumery in my brand is my passion project. So I still have like a day job. That's my 9 to 5, you could say. And then
Right.
perfumery and my fragrance business, my perfume brand is my 5 to 9. It's what I do for
Yeah.
fun. And again, my passion.
My goodness. So I mean that's going to require a huge amount of discipline to have to do all the things you do in your day-to-day job and then work on your brand, which has so many elements as it is, let alone with a sort of indie brand where you've got to do so much of it yourself.
No, absolutely. It's a kind of a cheesy saying, but I found what has really helped me unlock both my creativity and what I've been able to do is that saying that discipline is freedom. And it sounds kind of campy, but if you look at a lot of the best artists out there, a lot of what they did, even though they were very, I mean, obviously creative and free thinking,
Yeah.
and they seemed to be living this carefree lifestyle, they were very disciplined. Like they were creating
Yeah.
every day. They had
Absolutely.
dedicated time to it, and I
Yeah.
really tried to implement that myself. But you're right, it's
And I
hard.
think
And I would be remiss. I got to be really clear. I'm the co-founder of my brand, so
right.
the if you go on my site, you'll see. But my business partner, her name is Ellen, and she's very much like doesn't want to be on camera. Is like, Teddy, you're the face, but she's actually a good friend of mine. We work together in our day jobs, and
Right.
she discovered my sort of secret hobby because I never really talked about it with many people for a lot of reasons. There's quite a bit of stigma around perfume in America,
Yeah, yeah.
and she discovered it, and I ended up sharing some of my fragrances with her, and she was like, "Teddy, like you got something here," and she was really the one that pushed
Yeah,
me
these are good.
to go for it. And she had previously launched a men's skincare brand like 10 years ago or so, uh,
Okay.
long since sold and everything. So we teamed up, and yeah, we co-founded it. So I'm the face and do all that, but she's very much an integral part of behind the scenes stuff too.
Amazing. And do you find, with your day job, uh, do you find that you have to almost compartmentalize the two, or are there things that you bring from your kind of day job and the tech world into what you're doing in fragrance, or do you see them as very much separate?
No, at first I very much compartmentalized them. I
Mm,
I never talked about it at work. I mean, frankly, when you are in leadership in any kind of corporate setting, and people often talk about startups being very different. I mean, they are in some ways, but you're still having to interface with investors, people of
yeah.
some pretty conservative backgrounds sometimes, and leading with, "Hey, I make perfume in my free time," gets you some funny looks as a man,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and unfortunately, but the I very much kept it completely compartmentalized. I had never talked about it to anybody, and as one of the greatest things I've been able, or one of my the thing that I'm really happy that I've done is blend them together now. Like everyone at my job now knows what I do. It's not a secret anymore.
Yeah.
And I've found it's really helped inform my day job too, because I've learned a lot from launching my own perfume brand, and obviously my business background has been really helpful for that. But
Yeah, I'm sure.
it's not feeding off each other, and it's great.
No, I can really relate to that. I mean, in a slightly different way. I mean, I write and podcast and work in fragrance, but I also work in the music industry. And similarly, there was a time where I kept it all very distinct, and on LinkedIn and all those things, there was no trace of this work. But I think you're right, and I think, well, hopefully attitudes are changing for a start, but also I think now I've lent into it more, and I feel proud of some of these things that I'm doing. I'm just not prepared to just keep it so separate, and I think that these two things can inform each other. But it's very interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of conversation here at the moment about, well, there's the Netflix show Adolescence and Manosphere and all those things, and it just there's a lot percolating in my mind about attitudes to fragrance. And I'm doing a talk in a few months at a fragrance fair here called Men Smell, and we're going to have this male panel, not talking about fragrance in terms of male or female fragrances, but just this through a male lens, and how we look at fragrance. But it's interesting, whether attitudes are changing and how comfortable we are as heterosexual men talking about these things that should have no stigma at all. But you still feel sometimes that you have to kind of pick your audience. Do you think sometimes?
Absolutely. And part of what I've been trying to do is influence the conversation around that. Like a pretty big recurring theme in my content is this idea that perfume is for everyone. Uh, and I say perfume very specifically, even though I often talk about fragrance, because even just the fact that in America we try to use fragrance to talk about scented, fine fragrance products instead of perfume is just a reflection of how sensitive our masculinity is, because
Yes.
it's there's literally guys saying, "Oh, I love my cologne, my fragrances," and they're wearing a parfum,
Yeah.
which is the French
Yeah.
word perfume, right? Like, and people say, "Oh no, but that's referring to the concentration." I'm like, "Yeah, but that's not the point. Like, you're literally wearing a perfume, and you're insisting on calling it a fragrance." And when I try to challenge people and say, "It's just marketing," and if you go to any perfumer, there is no way to make a gendered scent because fragrance molecules are inherently genderless. And if you go across different
Absolutely.
cultures, like men in the Middle East love wearing rose.
Yeah.
Try saying that to a man in America, and they, not all of them obviously, but many of them would
Mm,
have a bit of an aneurysm about that, right?
yeah. Do you sense then that America or North America is that conversation is even slightly further back than it might be in the UK or in Europe? I suppose, is it, I don't know, oversimplifying it to say that the perfume culture here from Italy and France and the UK to a lesser degree. Do Do you think that sometimes you're having to do a bit even more education in the States to men?
I don't think it's necessarily more. I just think that, especially in the last like 10 years, and I'm not sure if that timeline's perfect, but um, there's plenty of, homophobia and sort of gender stigma related things across most cultures in the world in different
Mm,
ways. It's
yeah,
not like all of my comments from men getting riled up when I say perfumist or everyone are from only American men. Like, they're
from
pretty clearly
America.
from
Yeah,
international men too.
yeah,
But
yeah,
what I have noticed is that there has been a backsliding with the political climate in America, where if you look at like the rise of fascism across different cultures over time, it really is tied to, or can be tied to, the lack of opportunity for young men.
yeah,
And in America, we've seen income inequality rise dramatically. We've seen opportunity become much more challenging, along with a really intentional rhetoric from extremist groups about men being the provider and all these things. And what's happening is,
yeah.
I think, is creating this tension where men are being fed like manosphere content about how there's supposed to be a certain gender ideology, but with that comes this idea that they need to be a provider and they need to be very successful. And if you're a young man right now, like that,
It's hard.
you're in a
Yeah,
you're in a tough spot with the income inequality
yeah,
and the wage inequality we're seeing compared to like even 20 years ago. And what I think it's doing is it's driving subset of men who've been fed all this red pill content to be extremely, extremely sensitive and terrified of being perceived as feminine, because they believe their
yes.
self-worth is tied to being this masculine ideal that they can't actually achieve because of the systemic inequalities that they are facing right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so well put. And looking for easy answers from people online who, yeah, aren't providing that at all. It is scary. It is scary.
Yeah.
But
It's easy to provide fear-based.
talking about social media, I mean, I think
Sorry, I think I got a little delay there. I didn't mean to talk over you.
so. Sorry, yeah. Sorry, you were saying it's easy to provide fear based.
Yeah, it's just the fear-based messaging of like, oh, your problems will be solved if men are men and women are women, and this is what that looks like, is much
Yeah,
easier to pump down people's throats through an algorithm that prioritizes controversy and conflict than real, more
exactly.
subtle, socioeconomic
Nuanced
and
conversation.
political and nuanced conversations around what is inherently
Yeah,
linked to massive increasing wealth inequality that's driving these conversations, and it's tough.
it is. Well, it's so interesting to hear you talk about that. And I think overall, I've been seeing lots of your content. I think what struck me is you have this real sort of mastery of social media and just showing behind the curtain and showing your process, but also talking about, as you said, talking about discipline, talking about your work ethic and all these things. Was that a deliberate idea from the start to kind of show the full process and the full gamut of what you do?
Yeah, kind of. I think what's funny is that my wife still thinks it's a little bit uh, crazy that I'm, I guess, an influencer now, because before I started posting on TikTok a little over a year ago now, I never really was active on social media. I did like a little social media experiment for my MBA a while, like 8 years ago, related to Hawaiian
Yeah.
shirts. Wasn't very successful.
Okay.
I've never been big on social media. I'm not like, I barely used Instagram. I never used TikTok. But
Mm,
then, as I was like, I really wanted to chase my dream of launching a fragrance brand, and you got to market it. And social media
yeah.
is the great equalizer when it comes to marketing. And so I did a bunch of research. I was like, how am I going to do this? And I just ripped the bandit off. And I appreciate you saying I have mastery now, because if you scroll deep in my feed, especially on TikTok, and
Maybe
my
I
old
need to
videos,
go further down.
you know, uh, I like talking on like a Zoom call or whatever is fine, but talking to a camera, like as
Mm.
a talking head video, I am not naturally good at that. My early videos were
Oh
rough.
dear.
Like I was trying to do on a script, and I was like very robotic. Like it was like I would talk normally, and then I would try to film, and I would like, my face wasn't moving. Like, you'll see
Yeah.
the rough. But really, I wanted to. What I did was I kind of pulled on my MBA background. I'm like, what's my differentiator, right? Like, how do I cut through the noise of social media for my brand and myself. And I was like, hey, like there's not really that many people who are knowledge about perfumery who are out here just being real. Like
Yeah,
let's dish it
exactly
out where
that.
we can. Let's share knowledge. And I figured I would lean into that. And since then, I've just been following the content that seems to connect with people, or
Mm.
just sharing the things that I'm excited to share. And that's the strategy: is behind the curtain, expose things that I can, amplify the voices of other independent brands where I can, and then just share stuff that I think is interesting.
I think it's working so well. I can't think of many other perfumers, certainly that. Yeah, we'll talk about the process, but we'll also reference other fragrance brands, the sort of wider context of what's going on. They'll do, if people check out your Instagram, and I'll put all the links, but you'll do fit checks and you'll show your outfit and do some humorous stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in there. And I know it's just talking to people here in the UK, I know it's really resonating, and lots of people are
Thank
enjoying
you.
what you do. So yeah, I think it's really refreshing. And as you say, there's sometimes feels like there's this, I don't know, sort of the perfumer and the perfume art always seems to have this slightly impenetrable quality, and I think it's so great to have this leveler where someone's inviting you in and showing the peaks and the troughs and how it all works. And I guess being an indie brand, there's challenge in that as well, isn't there? That you say with along with your co-founder, I imagine the two of you are having to do a lot of the heavy lifting yourselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got some great partners. Like my bottler is Sarah Horowitz and her team out of Los Angeles, and shout out to Sarah. She's a wonderful person. Has been just a
Mm.
great, just really generous with her time in terms of like helping me get pointers of how to get stuff moving. And uh, we've had some folks that have helped us with some design stuff, but really it's mostly Ellen and I. And we're at that inflection point where we're starting to get big enough where we need to start like um, bringing on more folks and like more support systems. But it's a lot, and we intentionally kept it that way because we did not want to bring on investors to launch, because this
Right.
is our creative outlet. She and I both have we've interfaced with a lot of investors, a lot of companies, and the reality of having an investor is that if you are trying to be a creativity driven brand, the moment you bring on an investor, you're bringing on expectations of return on investment from somebody else's
Mm.
perspective and somebody else's timeline. And there's no way that you can't start having to make some creative sacrifices. And so, I mean, will we take on investors in the future? Probably, maybe, I don't know. But in the beginning, it was important for us, like while we're establishing a brand identity and like, bringing my creative vision to life, like we wanted to make sure that we had no external accountability, like just us doing our thing, having fun,
Mm.
and bringing the art we want to life without having to deliver return to somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, you sound very clear-sighted about that, because I imagine that's a world you know very well anyway. I guess maybe for some brands, or dealing with venture capital and investors and all those things can suddenly it all seems kind of new. But I imagine that's you're quite familiar with all of that, so you know the pitfalls, and when that might be something you need to consider, I suppose.
And absolutely. And I want to be clear, there's nothing wrong with taking on investors and
Yeah,
having
yeah.
people that back you. Like that's a very powerful tool. But kind of going back to that MBA mindset, right? Like, we were thinking about how do we be different, right? And
Mm.
I create my fragrances just for my own, like I follow wherever my creativity is taking me. And being able to maintain complete creative independence is a differentiator in this market, because there's a lot
Yes.
of money flowing into fragrance because it is a high margin industry. And so we're thinking, okay, is it going to slow our growth? Absolutely. Is it going to be harder? Probably. But it's also a way to be different. And if you can establish yourself in the beginning and that creative identity, it's sort of I think it's a better long term play for what our goals were, because our
Mm.
goals aren't to just launch a fragrance brand to make money. It was because we were both creative people and we wanted to do something creative and artistic.
To have that outlet. Yeah.
Exactly, right.
Yeah. And in the States, where can people buy in bricks and mortar stores? Can they buy Teddy the Perfumer fragrances in physical retail as well as online?
Not in brick and mortar yet.
Mm.
We're It looks like that will be a thing relatively soon. I can't quite talk about it
Right.
yet, but
No,
it'll
no, no.
be
That's fine.
on my accounts. But
Yeah.
we never intended to. Our plan was to be D2C or direct to consumer just
Oh, was
indefinitely.
it?
But yeah, and that's what we are right now. But I think one of the things we realized too is, especially after launching, like I've one of the wonderful things of being on social media is I've met and have new friendships with a ton of people in the industry, and
Mm,
you realize that there are some great boutiques, and like I've obviously shopped those boutiques, but realizing that
yeah.
there's a tremendous benefit to just being in a physical store, both from a like a legitimacy perspective, just visibility. It's basically sampling, it's marketing. People complain about paying wholesale or the margins you have to give to stores, but
Mm.
like running a store and staffing it and having that retail space is expensive, and they're providing a
Yeah.
service that we can't. And so we are going to be pivoting to still obviously online and direct to consumer, but having select boutiques that we would be available at as well.
It's great to hear you say that. I mean, I've felt the same here. My dealings on the social channels and Instagram, it does seem like, for the most part, a really supportive sector. And I came to it only sort of 4 or 5 years ago when I started writing. But like you, I sort of found connections and friendships, and now go to some of these events in, Milan and Florence or whatever, and you realize, God, you sort of know more people than you think. And actually, if you go about this stuff in the right way and you try to be true to your word and supportive and everything else, we're all grown ups. There's some great people who want to see you do well, isn't there? So it's good to hear you say that too.
Absolutely, yeah.
So look, we'll talk a bit more about the brand, and I want to hear a little bit more about some of the fragrances. We'll get into that in a second. But on the podcast, I do like to find out about products that you might use, Teddy, in your morning and evening routine. So I wonder what that looks like for you. Are you loyal to certain products? Do you sort of play around with different things? What does your product lineup look like?
I mean, it's pretty simple for me, but I mean, my hair doesn't look like this getting out of bed. I've got pretty
That's a sharp.
wiry.
That's a sharp style.
Thank you.
Mm,
So I use I've got actually brought them along, but basically
great.
I get up and my hair is really quite thick, and so I swear by this day prickly pear hair oil.
Wow.
I've tried like leave-in conditioners and hair oils before, and I feel like they're just made for people that don't actually have hair that needs conditioning.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, mine is very dry, and that one really leaves my hair feeling quite soft. It has a little sheen to it, and then I put a lot of like hair wax in because like my hair is quite difficult to manage,
Mm,
and so I mean, I've tried all kinds of fancy stuff. I've tried
yeah.
you name the hair wax, I've probably tried it, and they're all. I feel like even the high hold ones, they're just like not. Again, they're made for people that have like really floppy hair that doesn't need to be managed. So
Yeah.
I ended up finding this stuff a year ago. It's this like random brand,
What's that called,
Gummy
Teddy?
Professional Wax Extreme.
Wax Extreme.
Yeah, it's been available for years. It works really well. I haven't found anything that works better. It's not
Great.
crazy expensive. And then I get razor burn pretty easily, and
Mm.
so I found the Phillips Norelco One Blade has been my
Yes.
go-to
Yeah,
for
they're
years.
good. Yeah.
Well, and two, I can like because I don't like I keep a stubble because otherwise I get ingrown hairs pretty easily, and being able to just shave and then like use the guard on the same thing is nice, not having to switch
Yeah.
between things all the time.
Yeah.
And by the way, if anybody struggles with like razor burn, razor bumps, I mean everyone's different, but apparently
Hmm.
a lot of the time it's because of like sensitivity to bacteria, like kind of getting in your skin from like the
Right.
microabrasions of shaving. And this stuff, Ten Skin,
TENO10. Yeah.
it's basically like alcohol with like some moisturizer in it. I think I'm not sure. Um, I get no razor burn when I put that stuff on afterward. I'm
That's
pretty
really good
sure
to
that you
know.
could use an alcohol-based aftershave and it would do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But pro tip: if you get razor burn, Ten Skin is legit. Um,
Love it.
and then my last one I'll highlight is so for the gentleman listening, for the young bucks out there too. If you are not wearing makeup in 2025, then you are shooting yourself in the foot here. I'm not talking about doing like full glam or something, but uh, you know, my face has got a lot of marks and dings on it because I was in
Mm.
combat sports for years, and
Oh, were you?
getting yourself a good concealer.
Yeah. Well,
This is
what
actually
have
an
you got
under eye
there, Teddy?
concealer. It's called Bye Bye Under Eye by It Cosmetics. I don't know if you can see that. It's not really
Yep, got
focusing.
it.
There we
Great.
go.
Bye
This
bye under
stuff
eye.
actually will stay on quite nicely. It blends well. I've got a bunch of like, especially when I was working, I'd come to work with like my face all tagged up. It'll cover you up real good. And
Yeah.
if you got a blemish or something going on, you can just put a little of that stuff on
Yeah.
there, and then you're
And Teddy,
looking
is
10
that
times
it
better.
says it's an eye product. So that's the product you will use all over your face, is it?
Yeah, I don't like not full coverage, but I've just my wife used this
Just
for under eye,
right.
and I tried it once, and I'd use it for like spot coverage, and I find that
Mm.
for whatever reason, however it's formulated, it just stays on and blends in really nicely. So I can apply it in the morning, and then like it's
Yeah.
still on at the end of the day. And so, like I've
And has it
got
got
like a
sort
bunch
of
of,
matte quality? It's not too shiny or anything.
but yeah, it's completely matte. It comes in a
Mm.
ton of different shades, so you can match your skin tone. And it really, it's I mean, again, it's some kind of concealer. It's a full coverage, anti-aging, waterproof concealer. There we go. And it just lasts like pretty much all day. And
Yeah.
especially like on my nose, like because I used to do a lot of submission grappling, and so I'd be like smashing my face against people. And I was
Wow.
getting all scarred up on my nose, and so
Yeah.
I put that on there, and I'm looking all fresh. So yeah, gentlemen,
Again,
it's
it's
2025. Get yourself a little concealer, look a little better, look a little better.
exactly no, and it's really good to hear you say that. And I think you're absolutely right. Again, why should there be any stigma these days? And people and men wear makeup in all kinds of different ways. And again, you talk about different cultures before. I've had guests on from South Korea and Japan and places like that, and where it's much more acceptable to have lots of BB creams and makeup on, but people will wear it in all different ways. But as you said there, even if it's just about creating a more of a canvas or covering up little blemishes, absolutely, why not? And at the end, there's so many great products out there that do that job. So yeah, love it. And Teddy, how about fragrance? And not so much in, I'm sure you've got a big old collection of fragrances that you love, but how do you go about choosing a fragrance in the morning? What's your sort of mindset on that? Is it done by your mood or things you're testing, or how do you approach it?
I mean, it depends. Like if I'm like right now, I'm finalizing three more fragrances for release, or I mean, they're
Oh yeah,
finalized. I'm doing my last my sanity testing to make sure that are they ready to be out in the world
yeah.
and have their own life, right?
Is this
But
good? Am I crazy?
yeah, right. You just it's sort of like, am I done? Am I good? Right. But I think generally in terms of wearing, like I know some perfumers talk about not wearing fragrance, and I mean absolutely, it's you have to be mindful about managing your smell exposure. Like if you're wearing fragrance in the morning and then you go to formulate at night, like you will get smell distortion because your nose, you get olfactory fatigue from. I mean, you could be wearing something that has ISOE super in it like 2 days ago, and it can still be on your skin a little bit.
Yeah.
And frankly, like I'm a collect. I started life as a collector, and for me, I find that it's really important to wear and sample and test fragrances a lot because, like,
Mm,
one, I enjoy it personally, and two, that's how I get one of the ways I get inspiration, right? And if I'm not like testing stuff for release, I mean, my process is kind of like twofold. I usually look at the weather, and then I look at what I want to wear, and like kind of the
right.
situation. And like if it's a super hot day, like I'm probably not going to wear like a monster patchouli fragrance unless I'm maybe going like somewhere outdoor and that's the vibe.
Yeah.
But I tend to pair, I'll generally pick like how cold or hot is it as a general narrowing down. And then from there, I usually base it on my outfit. And often what I like to do, not always, but the more I almost like to pair my fragrances to be the opposite of what you'd expect for the outfit.
Okay. Oh,
And
interesting.
so, yeah, so like a lot of people, they'll be like,
So
oh, I'm wearing all black and I'll wear like a heavy smoky fragrance. I kind of
yeah,
like to go the other direction.
to
So like if I'm wearing an all
contrast it a bit
dark,
more.
yeah, I'll wear like a rose fragrance, like
Mm,
Eau Rose Eau de Parfum from Diptyque is one of my favorites. Like the darker my outfit is,
fabulous.
the more likely I
Yeah.
am to wear that.
Mm,
And then if I'm wearing like a really kind of out there or just more casual outfit, I might do like Antaeus, for example,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I find, I
Nice.
think in art, you often find beauty comes from tension, like, or interest in
Mm,
beauty comes from tension. And
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with pairing a scent with the outfit like directly, which I do sometimes, but I find sometimes it's more interesting to go, okay, I'm really casual. Let's do something really intense. Or I'm very formal. I'm very dark. Let's do something light, fun, and like a white floral or like a rose, right?
But that gives you, you have some fun with it, and that keeps it interesting for you as well. Just playing around
Exactly.
with those dualities. Yeah. Love that. Love
And
that.
people too, like, there's a lot of folks in the fragrance community that are really concerned about, like, oh, what are people going to think about what I'm wearing if it doesn't match my outfit? And the reality is, like, even pretty experienced collectors are usually not very good at identifying smells out of
Yeah.
context.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you'll find that you if you smell interesting, like if your smell is interesting compared to your look, it creates like more intrigue versus just like
Mm,
desperately trying to pair it perfectly.
yeah. And there's also that thing of like, we can get wrapped up in what would someone else think of this, but in reality, most people are more worried about their own stuff, aren't they? They're kind of they're not as concerned about what we're wearing as we might think.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. And
ridiculous.
really, as long as you're not wearing so much that you're just like making people's eyes water as you approach them, you know,
Yeah.
you'd be amazed how just people really, our sense of smell is so poorly trained compared to
Mm,
everything else, right? That you'd be amazed what you could wear that seems obvious to you because you're used to the fragrance and you know it smells like jasmine. But people who then smell it in passing often they wouldn't even know if it
yeah,
was
they won't
Sauvage
know.
or not. They can't tell. They just know you smell
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. We teased earlier on about the actual fragrances in the Teddy the Perfumer line, and you mentioned Banane Au Chocolat. I'd love you to tell me a bit more about that one because it sounds intriguing.
That one is my favorite, I'd say, because it just
Is
has
it?
a well, it was a fun story, and my fragrances either come from like an experience or memory that I have that I'm trying to recreate, or they're just like a random inspiration. Like I don't have to have an amazing story behind each one.
Yeah.
It's kind of wherever the mood takes me. But Banana Au Chocolat started life as a chocolate patchouli fragrance. So I'm a big chocolate patchouli fan,
Mm-hmm.
and I had been wanting to kind of make my own take on it. So I've been just casually developing one over time, and I was wearing a trial of one of them when I came out of my office and lab space, and I just kind of walked into the living room, and then my daughter came running out of the kitchen, and she just ran up and sort of like jumped onto me and then came and sat on my lap. And but the problem is she had been covered in banana because she had
Oh,
just been in the
okay.
kitchen doing like a very ripe, goopy banana.
Yeah.
Uh, and she was quite young, and so it was just all over her hands. And I think she had gotten out of the chair where she'd been eating, and instead of going and getting wiped, my mom just came running to me because she heard me come out and smeared banana all over me. Like she kissed my face, so I had banana on my face, I had banana on my clothing, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so we go in to the kitchen, clean off, and we go back to the living room and sit down. And I started reading her a book. And I'm sitting there, wow, man, this one smells really good.
That's good.
Like, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it because it was because ripe banana is quite floral and heady. Like it's like a
Yes.
green banana or like a Runts candy banana is not like a ripe banana. And patchouli can be quite floral on its own in different ways. And so it was this like rich, heady, sweet, chocolatey, opulent smell. And I realized, oh, because I just kind of wiped myself quickly. I was covered in
Yeah.
banana still, basically, and the smell of the banana was mixing with my chocolate patchouli, and I was like, I got to make
Eureka.
this.
This is
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Well,
Problem
it's
though is that
yeah.
banana's hard.
Yeah, it is, and it's a tricky note, isn't it, in fragrance? I mean, there is obviously some notable fragrances that have it, but it's a tricky one to work with, I imagine.
It is because in perfumery, there's certain notes or styles of smells that people lament about, why can't I find a long lasting citrus fragrance? And by the way, people say they find long lasting citrus fragrances and they just smell like cleaning chemicals, by the way, just FYI.
Mm.
But there's certain aroma chemicals that just don't last. It's like why fig always tends to end up smelling like coconut in the dry down, because of how
Mm.
the accord is structured. The essential components that make it smell like fig burn off pretty quickly. And so banana is very similar because it's usually based around a chemical called isoamyl acetate, which can often take the fragrance in a very candied banana direction, because you'll do like
Yeah.
ethyl maltol, which is like sugary and vanilla and like, you know, and I didn't want that. I wanted ripe banana. And so it kicked off like a year quest of basically researching and looking at like GCMSs and just finding how could I make a banana smell that was more like a floral, heady, ripe banana and not like your traditional kind of candied banana that you get in
Yeah,
a lot
like
of
a
fragrance.
candy.
And I've heard some people comment in my reviews saying, oh, maybe it's a trick of the mind because the banana seems to be lasting longer than it should. Because if you're experienced with banana fragrances, you know the banana doesn't stick around. Well, I found a pretty creative way to do it that doesn't rely
Nice.
on isoamyl acetate. And I'm pretty proud of that because I feel like I really did achieve the ripe, funky banana feel.
Well, I'd love to. Hopefully, at some point, it can come across to the UK and the EU, and I'd love to get to sample it because it sounds amazing. Or those notes of patchouli and chocolate and banana seem they. It makes a lot of sense to me that those things would go well together. So yeah, I really look forward to having a smell. Um, Another thing I saw that you posted online, which I really loved, and in fact I went back to watch it a few times, was you talked about creating a creative identity, and the fact that you actually have to be quite intentional, and you were talking about collecting fragrances, but actually making the switch to calling yourself a perfumer, and therefore having to collect, to actually buy oils and think about it in a different way. And I love that way of reframing our thoughts. I'd love to hear a bit more about that because I thought it really struck a chord with me.
No, thank you. I'm glad you watched that video because I've had some people message me or like comment asking how they can kind of pursue like perfumery or creative endeavors. And I think the adopting of an identity is very central to this idea of kind of creating discipline in your life around the things you want to do. And I want to
Mm.
be very clear, like, I'm not this magically crazy, disciplined, wake up at 5 a.m. weirdo, right? But I'm like, you create your own versions of discipline. Like, what are the things that you don't compromise on? What are the
Yeah.
things that are part of your identity that you need to do, right? And I was at this inflection point where I was starting to spend a lot more money on fragrances, but I was trying to also collect. And it's expensive, right? And
Yeah. Oh, I can
you
imagine.
know, I'm very privileged and I've had a lot of success in my life, but like I budget. I'm not out here just like sitting on a pile of family money where I can just have an infinite collection
Yeah.
and just build everything I want, right? And so I was like, hey, you know, I want to keep doing this, but I'm not a perfumer. Like I just, but I could feel the pull of like, but I can feel myself going there. I want to do it. And then I had that realization, like the reason I wasn't spending money on it was because I hadn't given myself permission to believe that I could do it.
Yes.
And that went down this path of, okay, but like when am I a perfumer? Like at what point do
When
you
am
have
I
to go to
allowed to
school
call
for it,
myself that? Yeah.
right? And then I forget what it was, but actually a friend of mine read the book Atomic Habits. I haven't actually read it yet. I think I found a summary somewhere, but he suggested, he said, like you got to think about having an identity, because if you are a uh, if you take if you're like actually it's very common, you'll notice, that like very masculine dominated things, like if you golf, you call yourself a golfer. You could be terrible at golfing, but you got the
I'm
classic
still
like
a
male
golfer.
overconfidence, like I'm a golfer, right? And that's
Yeah.
like that's a
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Like I could be terrible at perfumery, but I could still call myself a perfumer, right? Like
Mm.
as for my own sake, because it's my hobby. Like I would do that if I was a golfer. If I played baseball, I'd be a baseball player. I wouldn't have to be a
Mm.
professional.
Yeah.
And that was a huge like inflection point in my life where I literally sat down and I said, I'm a perfumer. Like that is what I am now. And what it triggered was I rebudgeted. Like I basically stopped buying full bottles of fragrance because that money went towards building up my lab.
Right.
I started going, okay, well, if I'm a perfumer, like you need to have time to do these things, right? So I started like, what do I need to change in order to make time to achieve my goals as a perfumer? And I think the thing that a lot of people miss is that having discipline and goals is good, but a lot of what dictates whether you can be successful or not is what are you willing to trade for those new goals, right?
Right.
It's very easy to start a resolution and say, oh, I'm going to do this now. But you've just added something to your probably already pretty full life.
Yeah.
What are
So
you
how do
willing
you
to take
build it
away?
in all the time? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What are you willing to take away? Like, and a lot of people, it's spending money on things. It's like, I don't like, I have young kids, so it's not that hard for me to avoid, but like, I don't really go out. Right. I'm not
Right.
like out partying and, I go
Yeah.
out for fragrance events. I go out with my family. I'm not going out and doing a lot of social stuff because I'm doing perfumery. Right.
Mm.
And the discipline and the identity and then what are you willing to sacrifice or to change to give yourself time and energy and space to do those things.
I'm not surprised that post resonated with lots of people because, as you said, it can apply in so many different creative endeavors, whether you want to, write or set up your own company or anything. And again, I think it's just the different. I really like the fact that you're giving these different perspectives and being quite candid, but there's also some practical advice there and some takeaways, which is amazing. Yeah, you talk on your channel about the independent sector, and there you are on the West Coast, in America. And I just wonder what you think about the niche in the independent sector at the moment. Do you think it's in good health, and what part do you think you play in it with Teddy the Perfumer?
I think the industry as a whole is in very good health right now. I mean, if you just look at the growth numbers coming out
Yeah.
of all kinds of industry reports, it's pretty clear. I do think it's precarious though,
Do you?
because there has been influx of more sort of investment capital into the space, people who have had success in other industries who are now like looking to kind of, I think they are well intentioned generally, but they're now jumping in because it is a
Yeah.
potentially very high margin industry.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned this too in some of my videos where you now have this big wave of very aggressive marketing, lots of gifting, lots of ad campaigns, and brands that are churning out fragrances at a very high rate. And Remy,
Yes.
by the
Yeah.
way, who's another perfumer folks should check out on like TikTok and Instagram. He pointed out that there's a relatively small number of perfumers that are churning out an immense number of fragrances right now, or accredited for it.
Mm.
And I think the precariousness is that you've got a lot of brands that are launching with a lot of sense, and they're more trying to cash in than they are trying to create something new. And
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that, but there are definitely brands who are coming out and you're like, oh, like you launched with 10 fragrances and half of them are near dupes,
Yeah.
right? And you've got prominent Neiman Marcus placement, like,
Mm.
and the precariousness I think is that with these a big blitz in marketing and some kind of companies where people are starting to realize that they're really just trying to cash in versus like they're truly passionate about it, you can really erode kind of consumer sentiment. People get jaded, and you're starting to see
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
narrative pop up online.
People are spending a lot of
And
money
so,
on fragrances that are too similar to something else, or just don't feel like there's the heart and the genuineness in it.
yeah, and I'm definitely no expert on like international law, but there's definitely some influencers who are either underreporting their affiliation with brands, or they're like not required to based on the country they're in, and so they're hyping up a lot of these fragrances, and
Mm.
maybe they're not as good as people think they are, and so
Yeah.
uh, I feel like my role in it is in an industry where now there's a lot of marketing dollars being spent. to promote really big brands, I feel like there's been this narrative where sometimes independent fragrances feel like they're competing with each other, which is kind of true to an extent. Like you're all competing
Mm.
for similar purchasing power. But the way I look at it is independent brands are actually more together competing against large budget, large backed brand,
Yeah.
financially
Yeah.
backed brands,
Yeah.
because fragrance isn't like electronics, right? Where like there's a purchase window in which somebody's going to buy a computer, and companies are like fighting for that purchase, right? For me, there's a growing body of people getting into fragrance, right? Because of all the marketing from these big brands. That's a good thing, right? It's expanding the market. And what I'm trying to do is say, hey, like there's a whole other world of independent fragrances, right? So as people are being brought in, I'm trying to highlight myself and other brands because it's more like independent brands together trying to educate people about this whole other world of
Yeah.
perfumery that is easy to miss, especially when you're first starting out. And so I'm trying to
Yeah.
actually use that, like my own platform, not just to amplify my brand, but to amplify as best I can, like the independent sector.
Yeah.
Because
The indie sector. Yeah.
if let's say I pull somebody over to try Thin Wild Mercury or Physotic or One Day, right? Brands that I've talked about before that I quite
Yeah.
enjoy. If I've now converted somebody from just buying designer or like mainstream niche into an independent brand, they're much more likely in the future to like want to sample my fragrances, right? So
Yeah. Absolutely.
it's not like this us or them mentality for me. It's like no, like independent is his own little space, and I can try to help bridge people over into it.
Yeah. And you are in a quite a unique position, I suppose, as well, because as you mentioned before, you've got your own brand, you've got your own channel, but now people are sending, PRs and brands are sending you fragrances as well. So you've got this kind of hunter turned gamekeeper kind of thing. But yeah, that must give you a good perspective on some of the stuff that's going on. And I guess for your own brand, how much you can spend or deal with in terms of PR on your own stuff. I mean, do you do much of that now? Do you engage a PR agency and do parties and send stuff out to content creators, or do you kind of sit back on some of that?
No, everything we do is like all the content's created, all the marketing is like me mostly, and then
Right.
my business partner too. And we've actually been really lax on the gifting this early year because it's just been very busy in other ways.
Mm.
But basically,
And it's
our main
expensive, I
strategy,
suppose, as well, isn't it? It's expensive
well,
to do it.
like we haven't done full bottle gifting because just our production volume is not like we're not doing like massive
Yeah.
runs yet. But we do a lot of, or we have done a lot of sample gifting. And so the strategy until we're bigger is that, like right now, I'm planning another wave of like influencer gifting where I
Mm.
send people my sample set, right? And then as we get bigger, that will translate into doing some bottle gifting too. Cause like from my perspective, um, you know, easily one of the most efficient things a brand can do is just to build relationships with influencers and then just
Yes.
gift them product and say, hey, no strings attached, love you to experience it. And if you'd like to make a video, go ahead. And that's really been our strategy. That's what we got us launched. I did a lot of gifting sort of mid and late last year. And then we'll be kicking off another campaign here pretty soon. But that's just all it's all us. There's no like when
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
people get messaged by me and I'm like, hey, do you want a sample set? That's me messaging you.
It's you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not your
that's just
people.
me.
Yeah.
Well, I think, and again, when I talk about differentiators, like I thought about maybe outsourcing that, which you can, but for me, it's not. I enjoy it. I'm building relationships with people. Like
Mm.
these are a lot of these influencer people are really
And that's important,
nice
isn't it?
folks,
That's important to
right?
do.
And that's like again, a lot of brands, the founder kind of steps back, but fragrance like is mostly marketing. Like
Mm.
to be successful in a brand, like you need to market a ton. And so like that time investment, like I enjoy messaging people and that's different.
Worth
Like you're
doing.
actually just talking with me. If you've got questions, like I'll answer them. So
Mm. That's really good to know. Thank you. Um, and I'm always interested with the guest on Man in the Mirror to think about what they think about the man that looks back at him in the mirror. And you're a younger man than me, but when you're doing your morning and evening routines, how do you feel about the man that looks back at you? Are you comfortable with what you see?
I knew you were going to ask the question, and so I thought kind of long and hard about how I'd answer it. And I feel like at one point I was trying to think, oh, what's an eloquent thing to say? But I feel like that'd be, too obvious. And I think when I look at myself, I'm sort of reminded of a lifelong struggle where I don't know that I will ever be happy with who looks back.
Really?
And what I mean by that is that I'm sort of cursed with a bit of always trying to do something new and to grow and to further
Mm,
myself, which has served me really well in many ways. I mean, it's why I've been able to launch a fragrance brand, while doing other stuff too. But I think it just this as I get older, this awareness that it's a tough way to live because it can be difficult then to celebrate successes because you're like, okay, great, I
mm.
achieved that. What's next, right?
On to the next thing. Yeah.
Right. And so I think as I'm getting older, a lot of my focus has been to how do I get to a point in my life where I can look in the mirror and I'm not thinking about, what's the next thing this guy's going to do, and
Mm,
how do I become more at peace with the things that I have achieved while still being excited about trying to do more. Because
yeah.
I've been described as being kind of driven by a motor, and right now I'd say like um, I feel like the man in the mirror isn't who I want to be yet.
Mm,
And I want to get to a place where I'm more comfortable with that because, I want to I want to enjoy the successes as I get older
yeah.
more.
No, I totally get that. But I don't think that's unique to you, Teddy. I think we're all guilty of that in some ways, aren't we? Of sort of, it's, what's the next thing, and not taking time to reflect and celebrate or appreciate the good things we have. And I suppose, that gets into a whole other conversation about, all the stuff we're consuming on social media about, other people's lives, and, what the
Oh yeah.
things we're supposed to have. And, and then it sounds slightly trite, doesn't it, to talk about, appreciating the simple things in life. But a lot of people who are very content are much better at that than I think I am, just actually enjoying the simpler things. And I guess,
Totally.
it must be tricky as well, because, you're absolutely at a stage, if you've got one career on the go, and you've got this relatively new brand, and you've got a young family, and that there's still a lot ahead, isn't there? There's still, I guess, there's that stage where there's still things you want to achieve. And I suppose there's still lots to do with the brand. And you've talked already so eloquently about your kind of route map, and where things are going. So it's, yeah, I can see why it's tempting just to be, motoring on, and just keeping going, because well, there's some really exciting things happening, isn't
Yeah, and I think that's this last year in particular has been really eye opening for me because we only launched the brand like 6 months ago, not even quite yet.
it? Really? Is
And
that what it is?
oh yeah, late. I think it was like mid September last year.
Wow. Okay.
Well, okay, technically I did a soft launch in like June where I sent out
Yeah.
sample sets. So I guess
But it's still not
June,
even
but
a
then the
year.
full bottles launched in September. Uh,
Goodness.
and I only started making content like just over a year ago. And the level of success I've had in that time is well beyond what I really thought.
Mm.
Like my goal when I started, like in mid January of like last year, was if I get to 1,000 followers by the end of the year. I was like, like because I never done that before. Like I was like,
Yeah.
see if I can do that.
You're about, is
And
it 25,000 now, something like that, on Instagram?
yeah, I'm at 20. I just hit 25 on Instagram, and I'm almost at 60 on TikTok,
Wow.
like
Did you start
57
on
or something.
TikTok? You were talking about TikTok earlier? Was that the first? Did you start your content on TikTok first?
Yeah, TikTok is. I started on both, but Instagram's algorithm is like really bad. Instagram is
Mm.
not a great platform, unfortunately. TikTok is
Yeah,
far superior, and there's a reason why.
I need to do more on TikTok, but anyway, yeah,
Well,
it
the
scares
algorithm is
me.
way better.
Is it?
Well, yeah, I mean, when you first open TikTok, it's going to serve you some weird stuff because it does know what you like, but it's
Yeah.
shockingly good at identifying what you like eventually. And my content was able to reach people much more effectively on TikTok. And the only reason I finally started blowing up on Instagram was I took my backlog of content and I started posting twice a day. And then a couple of
Okay. Right.
accounts were really big like Olivia Olfactory, she put one of
Yes.
my videos in her story, and then like all of a sudden I got a bunch of traffic, and then something happened where Instagram was like, "Oh, your videos are good," and then like
People like
overnight,
them. Yeah.
yeah, like my reach like 10x, like overnight. It was the weirdest
Wow.
thing. But yeah, TikTok is where I cut my teeth, and it was a great learning experience. And also, the engagement is way better on TikTok, like shockingly better. The
Wow.
big difference I've noticed between the platforms is on TikTok, when people comment, they're like talking to you. They're like having a conversation with me. Even now that I'm like, a bigger follower or bigger, creator on TikTok, they ask and they speak to me in the comments like a person.
Mm.
Whereas I notice Instagram, people kind of talk, they almost like the way they talk is more like you're an animal in a cage that they're like viewing.
Oh God.
It's very
Yeah.
voyeuristic. Not always,
Yeah.
like there are people who
Yeah.
talk to you, but the cultures and how people comment in Instagram and TikTok are very different, which is I never really
Yeah.
realized
That's really
before.
interesting. Do you think it's almost as though people on Instagram don't think that you'll see it, or they just sort of see you as this, I don't know, this thing, inanimate
I
thing?
my hunch, and because what I've learned about like the differences in the platforms is like people on Instagram are much more conditioned to see advertising and like people
Mm.
presenting this facade. And I
Yeah.
think it results in people like, oh, you're posting to be viewed, right? And so then people tend to comment on you. But
Yeah.
TikTok is very
Not to you.
conversational.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's meant to be, and the filming style is much more casual usually.
Yeah.
And so it feels more real. It often
Yeah.
is. And so people then talk to you.
Mm.
That's my theory,
Hmm.
at least.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, and it's gonna. Yeah, I mean, I put some stuff. I do put content on there, but I think because Instagram, I was more my native platform. I feel more comfortable. I've just end up doing more of that. But you're absolutely right, and I can see the growth of certain people on TikTok, and yeah, it's a seems like there's much more going on over there. So yeah, I need to get better on it.
Well,
Teddy,
nice thing about TikTok is that the lower production value content often does better.
yeah,
So you can just
that's
like,
true.
wing it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing as well, isn't it? Often, there's that voice in your head saying, "Oh, it's all got to be, well produced and slick." But you're absolutely right. The better things on TikTok feel a bit more homespun and a bit more DIY, don't they? Which is seemingly what people want to see, and as you say, it's a bit more real. So yeah. The final thing, Teddy, I always ask the guests is what makes you happy and what brings you joy. Perhaps you've got this really busy dual work life, but if you get downtime, what are the things that bring you joy?
I think for me right now is when I'm able to spend like quality time with my family because my kids are
Mm.
young and they're at
How
that
old are they,
stage
Teddy?
where they are 3 and 5 now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great age, though.
And yeah, and they're very much like just their brains are exploding, right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
uh, hitting all these new developmental milestones and like learning all these things in
Mm.
school and daycare and whatnot. And it's just kind of a amazing seeing how they're just their own little people, since
Yeah,
day one, pretty much, and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
developing their own little lives, and it's just really amazing to just be part of that and help them grow. And then obviously too, I get a lot of joy out of just spending time with like my friends, my wife, and just I'm kind of a homebody these days. I've got like my kids, my wife, family, work, and then perfumery. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And then the
So
perfumery, like I very much get a lot of like, big dopamine hit from all the good
yeah,
smells, right?
you got plenty going on there, Teddy. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No shortage of things, right? I gotta
No,
uh,
I
find the
loved. I
time
loved.
where I can.
Yeah, I loved. There was a video that you talk about your children. There was a video that you put up with your daughter and her kind of honest opinion of your fragrances, which I thought again was a really lovely little window into the world. And yeah, that's kind of content that you don't see very often, but it was beautiful. It was lovely.
And it's fun too, because my wife actually has a really good sense of smell and a good palate as well. And my son is still a little young to know for sure, but it's pretty clear he's got a really good sense of smell and a good palate. And my daughter's is like shockingly good, and she's older and
Really?
able to communicate
Yeah.
more. But it's been fun because they're now getting into like smelling what I make, and they give me their
Mm.
opinions on it, and it's
Unfiltered
amazing.
opinions.
Yeah, and they just because a lot of our understanding of smell is based on association, and so they haven't developed these associations with smell as much. So like it's almost like they're linked to what a smell is and more pure and not filtered through a
Yeah.
lifetime of experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's been really fun to just watch them get into smelling. And I don't like trying to make them do it. They want to smell what I make,
Yeah.
and
And it's around, I suppose. And it's what Daddy's doing.
exactly.
Oh, Teddy, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to hear more about you and Teddy the Perfumer brand. And I'm going to put lots of links to where people can find out more, and certainly where they can find you online. But it's been a real joy to hear about the journey, and I no doubt it's just at the beginning. And I look forward at some point to hopefully the fragrances making their way. Well, obviously, people can buy them online here, but it'd be amazing to see them in some stores in the UK and the EU in the future, somewhere down the
Well,
line.
that's the plan. We it takes a little while, but we're starting to
Mm,
go through the EU regulation process, and obviously
really
it's different with the UK, but we're working our way over there. Just might take a minute.
amazing. Well, thank you for your time. Have a good day, and well, it was great to connect, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
Thanks, Teddy.